Monitoring and evaluation. Some would call it the last phase of the project cycle, after situational analysis, project design, and project implementation. But this is just a matter of perspective. The organization where I used to work with focuses on supporting partnerships with local NGOs. Because they have a long-term commitment with NGOs, the project cycle guide they have starts with the monitoring and evaluation to emphasize that new projects must be built on the learnings of previous projects. Project officers are encouraged to promote a learning environment whenever they engage with partners. As such, monitoring and evaluation already overlaps with the situational analysis phase. Which brings us to ask, why do we conduct monitoring and evaluation? The simple answer is to gather evidence of progress, project contribution, and achievements. But many silently ask, can we even avoid monitoring and evaluation? Rarely do we find people who want to be evaluated, who likes to take exams, who wants to be measured. Sa Tagalog, pagkatasa. Sinusukat ka kung ilang tasa ba ang kahalagahan mo. People are afraid to fail. More importantly, people are afraid of the implications of monitoring and evaluation. And some have legitimate reasons to be afraid. Some M&D activities are fault-finding, to provide evidence to change the ways of working, to remove or reassign people, to terminate a project, or discontinue funding. M&D has a potential impact on the input resources, the activities, the strategies, the desired outcomes, or the entire project itself. Moreover, M&D is a rigorous exercise. Proponents sometimes forget to allocate resources, people, and time for M&D because it's not valued the same way as the core activities or operations of the project or the program. Worse, people sometimes do not see how the results of the M&E are used. If people do not recognize how the amount or quality of their effort evaluated do not benefit themselves or the community, they start regarding M&E as a mere compliance. As such, the purpose of M&E must be clear to the people and the community. Moreover, the methodology, the information to be gathered, and the process of gathering must be aligned to the purpose of M&E. Because it will take much resources and time, the process and purpose must be balanced to the overall goal of the project and the community. Two primary goals of conducting M&E are for accountability and learning. Several organizations are hiring monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning officers, or MEAL officers, to make sure that these are conducted accordingly. In terms of accountability, this can be upward to donors, authorities, or other stakeholders. Most of the formal mechanisms, the reports, have been established to ensure this type of accountability. What is gaining more prominence is the downward accountability. How do we make sure that the community that is supposed to benefit from the project is provided quality service? This can be tricky, since in most cases, there's a sense of debt of gratitude, utang na loob, by the community on the project proponents. In many cases, there is a fear that complaining or providing negative feedback will result to the pull out of the project. Sometimes the community themselves do not know what they are supposed to be entitled to in terms of accessing services from the proponent. Often, poor service can be negotiated properly if the community is properly organized and capacitated. But often, this is just overlooked by the community. Another purpose for conducting M&E is for learning. Such learning can be meant internally for the proponent, the community, or the stakeholders involved. Such learnings result in changes within the project to improve its implementation or for future projects. The key is to recognize the resulting changes and not just leave the lessons in documents to gather dust. Another level of learning can be intended for other communities or practitioners. To actualize this, the lessons must be consolidated and shared to draw out the essential elements and principles that can be applied in different contexts. Recognize the assumptions, the contributing factors, and results for such lessons. This will inform the proponent and the other practitioners and create a wider knowledge to build on. By packaging and designing around these key purposes, there's a better chance for the proponent, community, and other stakeholders to engage accordingly with monitoring and evaluation. What is the difference between monitoring and evaluation? Monitoring is a deliberate, systematic, and continuous collection and analysis of relevant information on project progress. On the other hand, evaluation is a systematic assessment of the worth of the project at specific moments. What do they measure? Monitoring measures inputs, activities, and outputs, while evaluation measures the success and failure of the project, meaning the results, outcomes, and impact. What questions do they ask? For monitoring, is the project on track as planned? For evaluation, it's quite broad. Have objectives been achieved? How is the project progressing towards its outcome and impact? Who conducts monitoring and evaluation? For monitoring, it's usually internal monitors. For evaluation, it can be a mix of internal and external evaluators. What are the immediate purpose? For monitoring, it's meant to adjust or correct the situation. For evaluation, it's meant to change the design, strategy, or stop the work. Both are important. Actually, both are often mixed together. In development practice, all monitoring also involves some evaluative concerns. All evaluation events are part of a broader monitoring. There's no strict characteristics, but be sure to be clear on the purpose of your monitoring and evaluation. What is the difference between formative and summative evaluation? What is impact evaluation? Let's recall the results chain. We start with the context that the project wants to contribute to. Through the project, strategies will be implemented with inputs that will be placed into action. These results to the desired changes, the immediate outputs of activities, the outcomes or the functional or empowering effects, and the impact or the significant or lasting change. Monitoring focuses on the strategy, specifically the inputs, actions, and outputs. Evaluation covers the entire spectrum. By covering the same scope as monitoring, formative evaluation is an assessment for learning. On the other hand, summative evaluation covers more of the outcomes and impact. Summative evaluation is an assessment of learnings. Impact evaluation covers the entire range, but there is more focus on the impact. Common assessment areas are for relevance, efficiency, consistency of strategies to the goals, effectiveness, impact and sustainability, gender, responsiveness, and inclusiveness. Recall in the project designing phase, where we had discussions on the theory of change and the logical framework. We mentioned that the theory of change placed emphasis on the impact and outcomes in order to give us focus on what we really wanted to happen in the community. The logical framework focused on the details on how we will do things to reach those desired changes. It seemed in the project design phase that the two tools were practically the same thing, since they were logical cause and effect patterns. But when complexities of reality gets in the way of our best laid assumptions and plans, our evaluation processes will point us back to our theory of change. This is the reason why we emphasize that we have to give effort in determining our strategic goals and not be bogged down by superficial activities and outputs. If the big picture in our theory of change proves to still be relevant, then the areas of adjustment would be in the details of our logical framework. Be wary of the invisible power the logical framework has on us. I have seen many proponents who are afraid to negotiate their plans with donors and stakeholders because they are afraid that this is a failure of their upward accountabilities. As development workers, we always push ourselves to ensure downward accountability and enable the power of communities, and yet we ourselves find difficulty exercising our own powers. Learning and recalibrating strategies to reach the pro-people goals are not necessarily failures of projects, but rather desired outcomes of the monitoring and evaluation processes. Designing monitoring and evaluation. The following M&E design questions have to be answered. Why? What are the objectives? Define the M&E goals. Is it to assess the project, improve project management, promote learning, understand the different stakeholders' perspectives, ensure accountability? For whom? Identify the users of M&E. Is it for the implementing agency, the organization, the community, the beneficiaries, policymakers, donors? What? Define the object. What are the contexts, activities, processes, relationships, desired results? How? Identify the tools and approaches that the M&E will use. Choose from a range of methods and tools. Identify existing capacities and needed capacities to implement the M&E. Where? Define the place and scale. Where is the location of the M&E? Is it just a desktop review? Is it going to be done in the community? Is it going to be done just within the institution? At what level? Will it be in the individual level, the household or family level, a group level, a community level, intercommunity, a region, a national level, an international level? What will be the sampling size? What's the method for sampling? Would it be random or purposive? Or would you use case studies? When? Establish the timing and the frequency. Will it be conducted before a project so that you can establish the baseline data? Will it be done during the project implementation? How often will you do it? Or would it be after the project for a summative and impact evaluation? Who? Identify who will conduct the M&E. Is it internal monitors, the project or the program staff, or the community and the beneficiaries? Or would it be external consultants? Know the difference on why you will choose internal or external evaluators. Internal monitors and evaluators have better knowledge of the project and the context. However, they may also have biases that may have an impact on the results of the M&E. These biases are not necessarily detrimental, but you must be able to anticipate how this may impact the results and if the impacts are desirable. For example, in participatory M&E wherein the community are the implementers of the M&E itself, their biases sometimes show their priorities, and these priorities may need to be targeted since these are the areas that can actualize collective action or mobilization. However, these biases can also be manipulative and can weaken the credibility of the M&E itself. Be sure the community is able to manage the expectations by applying the approach. External evaluators, on the other hand, are primarily recruited to provide objectivity or an expert eye on the project. This usually adds credibility to the project and the evaluation. Moreover, external evaluators are able to identify lessons that are often overlooked because external evaluators immediately identify how the learnings can be applied in a different context. However, this can also be a disadvantage since too much focus is provided in analyzing the replicability in other contexts that it lessens the depth of their analysis. Evaluators would be able to provide deeper analysis because of their familiarity of the context and the strategy. The final W is bueno ngayon. What is it all for? Recall our initial discussion on the challenges of M&E. While we have identified the why or the purpose of the M&E, are these reasons enough for the proponents and the community for them to overcome their fear and participate actively in the M&E? Formulating indicators for M&E. What are indicators? Indicators are markers against which to measure changes or results brought about by the development action or the project. This would include both expected and unexpected results, positive and negative changes. Indicators are needed for monitoring both the progress of project activities, or the output indicators, as well as whether progress is being made towards the objectives, the outcome indicators, and the overall aims, or the impact indicators of the project. What is the difference between qualitative and quantitative indicators? Which one is preferred? Qualitative indicators show changes that can be observed, described, but difficult to measure. This would include changes in attitudes, beliefs, feelings, perceptions, power relationships, organizational development. These can also be measured through the use of scales, rankings, etc. Quantitative indicators are numerical measures that quantify the changes, such as volume, number, frequency, averages, percentage, ratios. These are useful for comparisons, needed for standardized measures. Both have value in monitoring and evaluation. What is the difference between predictive and emergent indicators? It's a question of timing. When do we set the indicators? At the start, the middle, or at the end of the program? Not all changes can be predicted. Understanding the nature of the change we desire and the indicators for measuring it is needed. Updating, reformulating the indicators as the circumstances change, and introducing new ones if the context requires it. There are cases wherein the indicators are established only after the project has been done. What are proxy indicators? Proxy indicators are used. It is difficult to directly measure a phenomenon. For example, attendance is an indicator for the number of people who learned knowledge and skills from a training. Farmers' loan repayment rate during the lean months is a proxy indicator for increased farmer income and savings. An increase in the number of meals per day taken by the household to measure food security. However, don't confuse proxy indicators with the change objectives. You can use this sample matrix to consolidate your M&E design. Any questions?